Good evening. We are back with Anne Frank, The Diary of a Young Girl. And as we head into this last section before the afterword, today we are actually going to be talking about the event D-Day. And as you know, D-Day is what led to the liberation of the Nazi Holocaust camps. So as we begin, you need to turn to page 244, and we will begin with Tuesday, 6th of June, 1944. Dear Kitty, this is D-Day, came the announcement over the English news, and quite rightly, this is the day. The invasion has begun. The English gave the news at 8 o'clock this morning. Calais, Boulogne, Le Havre, and Cherbourg, also the Pas-Calais, were heavily bombarded. Moreover, as a safety measure for all occupied territories, all people who live within a radius of 35 kilometers from the coast are warned to be prepared for bombardments. If possible, the English will drop pamphlets 1 hour beforehand. Now, without going into the whole history, you should watch videos if you're not familiar with D-Day and you don't have time to read a book. There's a lot of nice little short videos that rehash it for you. But this was a surprise attack by the Allies on the beach of Normandy. There were several different areas of beach that were the object of surprise attacks. Now, the Germans knew that an invasion would take place, but they didn't know all the details, and the Allies went to a lot of trouble, I guess you could say, to make it easy, to make sure that the Germans were fooled about where the attacks would actually take place. So it was the mindset and the intelligence and the skill of the people planning this attack that led to the liberation of the Holocaust victims in these camps. So moving on, according to German news, English parachute troops have landed on the French coast. English landing craft are in battle with the German Navy, says the BBC. We discussed it over the annex breakfast at 9 o'clock. Is this just a trial landing like Dieppe 2 years ago? English broadcast in German, Dutch, French, and other languages at 10 o'clock. The invasion has begun. That means the real invasion. English broadcast in German at 11 o'clock. Speech by the Supreme Commander, General Dwight Eisenhower. The English news at 12 o'clock in English. This is D-Day. General Eisenhower said to the French people, stiff fighting will come now, but after this, the victory. The year 1944 is the year of complete victory. Good luck. English news in English at 1 o'clock, translated. 11,000 planes stand ready and are flying to and fro non-stop, landing troops and attacking behind the lines. 4,000 landing boats plus small craft are landing troops and material between Cherbourg and Le Havre, and incessantly English and American troops are already engaged in hard fighting. Speeches by Gerbrandy, by the Prime Minister of Belgium, King Haakon of Norway, de Gaulle of France, the King of England, and last but not least, Churchill. And guys, you've heard some of these speeches because in my class you had to memorize them. Great commotion in the secret annex with the long-awaited liberation that has been talked of so much, but which still seems too wonderful, too much like a fairy tale, ever come true. Could we be granted victory this year, 1944? We don't know yet, but hope is revived within us. It gives us fresh courage. It makes us strong again. Since we must put up bravely with all the fears, privations, and sufferings, the great thing now is to remain calm and steadfast. Now more than ever, we must clench our teeth and not cry out. France, Russia, Italy, and Germany too can all cry out and give vent to their misery, but we haven't the right to do that yet. Oh, Kitty, the best part of the invasion is that I have the feeling that friends are approaching. We have been oppressed by these terrible Germans for so long. They have had their knives so at our throats that the thought of friends and delivery fills us with confidence. Now, it doesn't concern the Jews anymore. No, it concerns Holland and all occupied Europe. Perhaps Margot says, I may yet be able to go back to school in September and October. Yours, Anne. I'll keep you up to date with all the latest news. And notice how she ends with an exclamation point. So this is a thrilling moment to those in hiding, to those, if they get word, in the concentration camps. And you can be sure the Germans were trying to make sure that no one got word of anything positive taking place. 246, if anything, knowing that the camps were about to be liberated, you'll have to remember that Germany took great pains to try to eliminate Jews faster than ever. Page 246, Friday, 9th of June, 1944. Dear Kitty, super news of the invasion. The Allies have taken Bayeux, a small village on the French coast, and are now fighting for Caen. It's obvious that they intend to cut off the peninsula where Cherbourg lies. Every evening, war correspondents gives news from the battlefront, telling us of the difficulties, courage, and enthusiasm of the army. They managed to get hold of the most incredible stories. Also, some of the wounded who are already back in England again came to the microphone. The Air Force are up all the time in spite of the miserable weather. We heard over the BBC that Churchill wanted to land with the troops on D-Day. However, Eisenhower and the other generals managed to get him out of the idea. Just think of it. What pluck he has for such an old man. He must be 70 at least. And yes, he was a very vibrant man. I don't know if you've listened to Churchill much, but he was an exciting man and such a great orator. He was so intelligent, and just you should take some time to listen to Churchill and his speeches. The excitement here has worn off a bit still. We're hoping that the war will be over at the end of the year. It'll be about time, too. Mrs. Van Dan's grizzling is absolutely unbearable. Now she can't any longer drive us crazy over the invasion. She nags us the whole day long about the bad weather. It really would be nice to dump her in a bucket of cold water and put her up in the loft. The whole of the secret annex, except Van Dan and Peter, have read the trilogy Hungarian Rhapsody. This book deals with the life history of the composer, virtuoso, and child prodigy Franz Liszt. It is a very interesting book, but in my opinion, there's a bit too much about women in it. In this time, Liszt was not only the greatest and most famous pianist, but also the greatest ladies' man right up to the age of 70. He lived with the Duchess Marie de Gold, Princess Caroline Sayn-Wittgenstein, and I do not claim to be an expert in these pronunciations, the dancer Lola Montez, the pianist Agnes Kingworth, the pianist Sophie Minter, Princess Olga Janina, Baroness Olga Meyendorff, the actress Lilla, what's-her-name, etc., etc. It is just endless. The parts of the book that deal with music and art are much more interesting. Among these mentioned are Schumann, Clara Wieck, Hector Berlioz, Johann Brahms, Beethoven, Joachim, Richard Wagner, Hans von Bülow, Antoine Rubinstein, Frederick Chopin, Victor Hugo, Henri de Balzac, Hiller, Hummel, Czerny, Rossini, Cherubini, Paganini, Mendelssohn, etc., etc. Liszt was personally a fine man, very generous, and modest about himself, though exceptionally vain. He helped everyone. His art was everything to him. He was mad about cognac and about women, could not bear to see tears, was a gentleman, would never refuse to do anyone a favor, didn't care much about money, loved religious liberty and world freedom. So a lot of good things to say about that person, except that it annoyed her that he was such a womanizer. On page 247, Tuesday, the 13th of June, 1944. Dear Kitty, another birthday has gone by, so now I'm 15. I received quite a lot of presents, so definitely mark her birthday. And I think, even though I didn't specifically say it, that you know to mark about D-Day and the invasions. All 5 parts of Springer's History of Art, a set of underwear, a handkerchief, 2 bottles of yogurt, a pot of jam, a spiced gingerbread cake, and a book on botany from Mummy and Daddy, a double bracelet from Margot, a book from the Van Dans, sweet peas from Dussel, sweets and exercise books from Meep and Ellie, and the high spot of all, the book Maria Theresa, and 3 slices of full cream cheese from Krahler. A lovely bunch of peonies from Peter. The poor boy took a lot of trouble to try and find something, but didn't have any luck. There's still excellent news of the invasion, in spite of the wretched weather, countless gales, heavy rains, and high seas. Now, one of the things they mentioned in the invasion was that it was important that the weather go right because of not only army and, the vehicles of the Allies crossing the British Channel, but also the paratroopers coming down from the sky, so they needed perfect weather. The weather had been iffy. Yesterday, Churchill, Smuts, Eisenhower, and Arnold visited French villages which have been conquered and liberated. The torpedo boat that Churchill was in shelled the coast. He appears, like so many men, not to know what fear is. Makes me envious. It's difficult for us to judge from our secret redoubt how people outside have reacted to the news. Undoubtedly, people are pleased that the idle English have rolled up their sleeves and are doing something at last. Any Dutch people who still look down on the English, scoff at England and her government of old gentlemen, call the English cowards, and yet hate the Germans, deserve a good shaking. Perhaps it would put some sense into their woolly brains. I hadn't had a period for over 2 months, but it finally started again on Saturday. Still, in spite of all the unpleasantness and bother, I'm glad it hasn't failed me any longer. So, what Anne was speaking about before, she felt like that, just the Dutch and everything were worried about this, that England and these other countries didn't seem to be worried. But now that the war was on them, they were all having to take notice, and all these other areas that would be involved would have to take notice. Wednesday, the 14th of June, 1944. Dear Kitty, my head is haunted by so many wishes and thoughts, accusations and reproaches. I'm really not as conceited as so many people seem to think. I know my own faults and shortcomings better than anyone. But the difference is that I also know that I want to improve, shall improve, and I have already improved a great deal. Why is it then I so often ask myself that everyone still thinks I'm so terribly knowing and forward? Am I so knowing? Is it that I really am, or that maybe the others aren't? That sounds queer, I realize now, but I shan't cross out the last sentence, because it really isn't so crazy. Everyone knows that Mrs. Van Daan, one of my chief accusers, is unintelligent. I might as well put it plainly and say stupid. Stupid people usually can't take it if others do better than they do. That is actually true. I don't know about Mrs. Van Daan, but that is true about how people are. Mrs. Van Daan thinks I'm stupid because I'm not quite so lacking in intelligence as she is. She thinks I'm forward because she's even more so. She thinks my dresses are too short because hers are even shorter. And that's also the reason that she thinks I'm knowing, because she's twice as bad about joining in over subjects she knows absolutely nothing about. But one of my favorite sayings is, there's no smoke without fire. And I readily admit that I'm knowing. Now, the trying part about me is that I criticize and scold myself far more than anyone else does. Then if Mummy adds her bit of advice, the pile of sermons becomes so unsurmountable that in my despair I become rude and start contradicting. And then, of course, the old well-known Anne watchword comes back. No one understands me. This phrase sticks in my mind. I know it sounds silly, yet there is some truth in it. I often accuse myself to such an extent that I simply long for a word of comfort from someone who could give me sound advice and also draw out some of my real self. But alas, I keep on looking, but I haven't found anyone yet. I know that you'll immediately think of Peter, won't you, Kit? It's like this. Peter loves me not as a lover, but as a friend, and grows more affectionate every day. But what is the mysterious something that holds us both back? I understand it myself. Sometimes I think that my terrible longing for him was exaggerated, yet that's really not it, because if I don't go up to see him for 2 days, then I long for him more desperately than ever before. Peter is good, and he's a darling, but still there's no denying that there's a lot about him that disappoints me, especially his dislike of religion and all his talk about food and various other things don't appeal to me. Yet I feel quite convinced that we shall never quarrel now that we've made that straightforward agreement together. Peter is a peace-loving person. He's tolerant and gives in very easily. He lets me say a lot of things to him that he would never accept from his mother. He tries most persistently to keep his things in order. And yet why should he keep his innermost self to himself? And why am I never allowed there? By nature he is more closed up than I am. I agree, but I know, and from my own experience, that at some time or another, Even the most uncommunicative people long just as much, if not more, to find someone in whom they confide. Both Peter and I have spent our most meditative years in the secret annex. We often discuss the future, the past, and the present, but as I've already said, I still seem to miss the real thing, and yet I know that it's there. So again, she still feels like the person that she's glad that she has Peter to talk to, but she feels like she confides in him a lot. He's not necessarily confiding in her a lot, probably more than he confides in anyone else, but that still, in a way, is kind of blocking the closeness she would like to have in him, because she would like for him to totally be able to confide in her. Thursday, the 15th of June, 1944, we are on page 250. Dear Kitty, I wonder if it's because I haven't been able to poke my nose outdoors for so long that I've gotten so crazy about everything to do with nature. I can perfectly well remember that there was a time when a deep blue sky, the song of the birds, moonlight and flowers could never have kept me spellbound. That's changed since I've been here. At Whitsun, for instance, when it was so warm, I stayed awake on purpose until 11:30 one evening in order to have a good look at the moon for once by myself. Alas, the sacrifice was all in vain, as the moon gave far too much light, and I didn't dare risk opening a window. Another time, some months ago, I happened to be upstairs one evening when the window was open. I didn't go downstairs until the window had to be shut. The dark, rainy evening, the gale, the scudding clouds, held me entirely in their power. It was the first time in a year and a half that I'd seen the night face to face. After that evening, my longing to see it again was greater than my fear of burglars, rats, and raids on the house. I went downstairs all by myself and looked outside through the windows in the kitchen and the private office. A lot of people are fond of nature. Many sleep outdoors occasionally, and people in prisons and hospitals long for the day when they will be free to enjoy the beauties of nature. But few are so shut away and isolated from that which can be shared alike by rich and poor. It's not imagination on my part when I say that to look up at the sky, the clouds, the moon, and the stars makes me calm and patient. It's a better medicine than either valerian or bromine. Mother Nature makes me humble and prepared to face every blow courageously. Alas, it has to be that I am only able, except on a few rare occasions, to look at nature through dirty net curtains hanging before very dusty windows. And it's no pleasure looking through these any longer, because nature is just the one thing that really must be unadulterated. Yours, Anne. So I kind of feel the same way. You know, since we've been doing remote school, one of the things that I've probably enjoyed, I've always enjoyed nature, but one of the things that's, I guess you could say, kept me sane is being able to take my dog for a walk, and I've talked to you about that. Just being able to go outside. Like right now, I'm sitting outside, and it looks like it may storm, so I hope I get through this before it does. But it's like we've talked before, when I'm in nature, that's when I feel like I can just talk out loud. I can talk to God. I can talk, well, to my dog when we're walking. I can just think in the still. You know, so many times we want to be busied with music, with videos, with just noise. And sometimes you need to just be in the silence where there's nothing to hear but just nature. You don't have to hear something all the time. Page 251, Friday the 16th of June, 1944. Dear Kitty, new problems. Miss Van Daan is desperate. Talks about a bullet through her head, prison hanging, and suicide. She's jealous that Peter confides in me and not her. She's offended that Dussel doesn't enter into her flirtations with him, as she'd hoped. Afraid that her husband is smoking all the fur coat money away. Remember how he sold her fur coat? And I guess she's afraid that he's spending all the money on cigarettes. She quarrels, uses abusive languages, cries, pities herself, laughs, and then starts a fresh quarrel again. What on earth can one do with such a foolish, blubbering specimen? No one takes her seriously. She hasn't any character, and she grumbles to everyone. The worst of it is that it makes Peter rude, Mr. Van Daan irritable, and Mummy cynical. Yes, it's a frightful situation. There's one golden rule to keep before you. Laugh about everything and don't bother yourself about the others. I like that quote, guys. I would mark that. As a matter of fact, what I think you should do is write that quote. And again, let me repeat it. Laugh about everything and don't bother yourself about the others. And just think of how you can relate that to your life. Things that might bother you, things that you can just learn to laugh at and not let it get to you. It sounds selfish, but it's honestly the only cure for anyone who has to seek consolation in himself. Kraler has received another call up to go digging for 4 weeks. He's trying to get out of it with a doctor's certificate and a letter from the business. Kufus wants to have an operation on his stomach. All private telephones were cut off at 11 o'clock yesterday. So I would make note, guys, of those 3 things about Kraler, Kufus, and the telephones. Friday, the 23rd of June, 1944. Dear Kitty, nothing special going on here. The English have begun their big attack on Cherbourg. According to Pym and Van Dyne, we're sure to be free by October the 10th. The Russians are taking part in the campaign, and yesterday began their offensive near I'm not sure how you pronounce that word. It's exactly 3 years to a day since the Germans attacked. We've hardly got any potatoes. From now on, we're going to count them out for each person. Then everyone knows what he's getting. So, guys, I would make a note that as of June the 23rd, 1944, they think they'll be free by October the 10th, okay? I would make a note of that. And that they've hardly got any potatoes left. Tuesday, the 27th of June, 1944. Dearest Kitty, the mood has changed. Everything's going wonderfully. Cherbourg, I'm still not sure how to pronounce that word, and Slobin fell today. Guys, I should have researched this book and the word production and pronunciation before I even read. So please forgive me. Lots of prisoners and booty. Now the English can land what they want. Now they've got a harbor. The whole Contentin Peninsula 3 weeks after the English invasion. A tremendous achievement in the 3 weeks since D-Day. Not a day has gone by without rain and gales, both here and in France. But a bit of bad luck didn't prevent the English and Americans from showing their enormous strength. And how? Certainly, the wonder weapon is in full swing. But of what consequence are a few squibs apart from a bit of damage in England and pages full of it in the Boche newspapers? For that matter, when they realize in Bochland that the Bolsheviks really are on the way, they'll get even more jittery. All German women not in military service are being evacuated to Groningen, Friesland, and Gelderland with their children. Muzard has announced that if they get as far as here with the invasion, he'll put on a uniform. Does that old fatty want to do some fighting? He could have done so in Russia before now. Some time ago, Finland turned down a peace offer. Now the negotiations have been broken off again. They'll be sorry for it later, the silly fools. How far do you think we'll be on July the 27th? Yours, Anne. We're on page 254. Friday, 30th of June, 1944. Dear Kitty, bad weather at a stretch to the 30th of June. Isn't that well said? Oh, yes, I have a smattering of English already, just to show that I can. I'm reading An Ideal Husband with the aid of a dictionary. War going wonderfully. Babroysk, Mogilev, and Orsa have fallen. Lots of prisoners. Everything's all right here, and tempers are improving. The super optimists are triumphing. Ellie has changed her hairstyle. Meep has the week off. That's the latest news. Thursday, the 6th of July, 1944. Dear Kitty, it strikes fear to my heart when Peter talks of later being a criminal or of gambling. Although it's meant as a joke, of course, it gives me the feeling that he's afraid of his own weakness. Again and again, I hear from both Margot and Peter. Yes, if I was as strong and plucky as you are, if I always stuck to what I wanted, if I had such persistence and energy, yes, then, I wonder if it's really a good quality not to let myself be influenced. Is it really good to follow almost entirely my own conscience? Quite honestly, I can't imagine how anyone can say I'm weak and then remain so. In other words, she's saying she doesn't understand if they are thinking they're weak, then she thinks they should be able to do something about it and not be that way. After all, if you know it, why not fight against it? Why not try to retrain your character? The answer was, because it's so much easier not to. And that's true, guys. Isn't it better just to be stuck in your ways than to put forth the effort to change the things you know you need to change about yourself? We all probably have something that we need to change about ourselves, but a lot of times we keep doing the same stupid things because that's easier than doing what we need, or let's say to break a bad habit, or just anything that is a negative aspect of our lives. It's a lot easier. And we look at people all the time that we see that have undesirable lives, and we think, why don't you just change that? But it's easier said than done, isn't it? Does that mean that a lazy, deceitful life is an easy life? Oh no, that can't be true. It mustn't be true. People can so easily be tempted by slackness and by money. I thought for a long time about the best answer to give Peter, how to get him to believe in himself, and above all, to try and improve himself. I don't know whether my line of thought is right, though, or not. I've so often thought how lovely it would be to have someone's complete confidence. But now that I'm that far, I realize how difficult it is to think what the other person is thinking and then to find the right answer. More especially because the very ideas of easy and money are something entirely foreign and new to me. Peter's beginning to lean on me a bit, and that mustn't happen under any circumstances. A type like Peter finds it difficult to stand on his own feet, but it's even harder to stand on your own feet as a conscious living being, because if you do, then it's twice as difficult to steer a right path through the sea of problems and still remain constant through it all. I'm just drifting around, have been searching for days, searching for a good argument against that terrible word, easy, something to settle it once and for all. How can I make it clear to him that what appears easy and attractive will drag him down into the depths where there is no comfort to be found, no friends, and no beauty, depths from which it is almost impossible to raise oneself? We all live, but we don't know the why or the wherefore. We all live with the object of being happy. Our lives are all different and yet the same. We three have been brought up in good circles. We have the chance to learn, the possibility of attaining something. We have all reason to hope for much happiness, but we must earn it for ourselves, and that is never easy. You must work and do good, not be lazy and gamble. If you wish to earn happiness, laziness may appear attractive, but work gives satisfaction. Isn't that so true, guys? She really is so mature for her age. I think to myself of so many families, and you see it on TV all the time, not to go so far as some of the murder mysteries that you watch, but you see of kids coming from super, super wealthy families that have ended up doing horrific, terrible things because basically they were idle. They didn't really have to work for anything. They had everything handed to them. And it was easy. It was easy. Until you almost just get wrapped up in the easy, and you get bored with the easy. And you're not satisfied with the easy. Yet when you really work hard for something, it's like that feeling of being proud of what you've done. That's what brings happiness, not when things are just given to you. It's kind of like when I was in high school, and most of my friends' parents bought them a car. And I knew my parents couldn't buy me a car. They never told me no, but I never asked. I knew they couldn't afford it. Not really. I bought my own car, guys. I still remember $5,800 Volkswagen Rabbit convertible. And my dad, I remember, was nervous to sign the papers for me. And I paid every bit of that loan until I sold that little car. And guys, I took such good care of that car. I was so proud of that car. And I think to myself, would I have been so proud had he just bought it for me? So work is a good thing for people. And I didn't mean to get on that, but I just want to show you how you can relate what Anne says to your own life. I can understand people who don't like work, yet that isn't the case with Peter. He just hasn't got a fixed goal to aim at, and he thinks he's too stupid and too inferior to achieve anything. Poor boy, he's never known what it feels like to make other people happy, and I can't teach him that either. He has no religion, scoffs at Jesus Christ, and swears using the name of God. Although I'm not Orthodox either, it hurts me every time I see how deserted, how scornful, and how poor he really is. Think, guys, if you don't have anything to hope on, anyone to look up to honor, again, your life is just kind of idle and empty. So you need something to believe in. People who have a religion should be glad, for not everyone has the gift of believing in heavenly things. You don't necessarily even have to be afraid of punishment. After death, purgatory, hell, and heaven are things that a lot of people can't accept. But still, a religion, it doesn't matter which, keeps a person on the right path. It isn't the fear of God, but the upholding of one's own honor and conscience. How noble and how good everyone could be if, every evening before falling asleep, they were to recall to their minds the events of the whole day and consider exactly what has been good and bad. Then, without realizing it, you try to improve yourself at the start of each new day. Of course, you achieve quite a lot in the course of time. Anyone can do this. It costs nothing and is certainly very helpful. Whoever doesn't know it must learn and find by experience that a quiet conscience makes one strong. Guys, that's a good little thing for you to start even at your young age. A diary or a journal, and date it every day. And I would do that for that whole day. I would have a column for good and bad, and I would mark the things that have been good and the things that have been bad, and then purpose the next day to change the things that you don't like and make a step plan for how you can change those things. She's giving me advice, something that I can think about, guys. Her wisdom is for any age. 2:56, we are on Saturday, the 8th of July, 1944. Dear Kitty, the chief representative of the business, Mr. B, has been in Beverwick and managed just like that to get strawberries at the auction sale. They arrived here, dusty, covered with sand, but in large quantities. No less than 24 trays for the office people and us. That very same evening, we bottled 6 jars and made 8 pots of jam. The next morning, Meep wanted to make jam for the office people. At 12:30, no strangers in the house, front door bolted, trays fetched, Peter, Daddy, Van Dan clattering on the stairs, and get hot water. Margot, bring a bucket. All hands on deck. I went to the kitchen, which was chock full with a queer feeling in my tummy. Meep, Ellie, Kufus, Hink, Daddy, Peter, the families in hiding in their supply column, all mingling together, and in the middle of the day, too. So she kind of just says, is this really a good idea? But I would make a mark about that they got strawberries and they're going to sit there and make jam out of their strawberries. People can't see in from the outside because of the net curtains, but even so, the loud voices and banging doors positively gave me the jitters. Are we really supposed to be in hiding? That's what flashed through my mind, and it gives one a very queer feeling to be able to appear in the world again. The pan was full, and I dashed upstairs again. The rest of the family was seated around our table in the kitchen, busy stalk picking. At least that's what they were supposed to be doing. More went into their mouths than into buckets. Another bucket would soon be required. Peter went to the downstairs kitchen again. The bell rang twice. The bucket stayed where it was. Peter tore upstairs, locked the cupboard door. We were kicking our heels impatiently, couldn't turn on a tap, even though the strawberries were only half washed. The rule is, if anyone in the house used no water because of the noise, was strictly maintained. So I would make a note on that while they were downstairs, the bell rang, so they had to take off and leave everything there. And guys, do you think they're kind of letting down their guard a little bit because surely they're not really trying to let down their guard, but in their back of their mind, they know that the war's fixing to end, that they think everything's going to be okay, and that mentally can kind of make you let down your guard. At 1 o'clock, Hink came and told us that it was the postman. Peter hurried downstairs again. Ting-a-ling, the bell right about turn. I go and listen to see if I can hear anyone coming. First at our cupboard door and then creep to the top of the stairs. Finally, Peter and I both lean over the banisters like a couple of thieves, listening to the din downstairs. No strange voices. Peter sneaks down, stops halfway, and calls out, Ellie! No answer, one more. Ellie! Peter's voice is drowned by the din in the kitchen. He goes right down and into the kitchen. I stand looking down tensely. Get upstairs at once, Peter. The accountant is here. Clear out. It was Kufus speaking. Peter comes upstairs sighing. The cupboard door closes. Finally, Kraler arrives at 1:30. Oh, dearie me, I see nothing but strawberries, strawberries at breakfast, strawberries stewed by me. I smell strawberries. Must have a rest from them and go upstairs. What is being washed up here? Strawberries. The remainder are being bottled. In the evening, 2 jars unsealed. Daddy quickly makes them into jam. The next morning, 2 more unsealed and 4 in the afternoon. Van Dan hadn't brought them to the right temperature for sterilizing. Now Daddy must make jam every evening. We eat strawberries with our porridge, skimmed milk with strawberries, bread and butter with strawberries, strawberries for dessert, strawberries with sugar, strawberries with sand. For 2 whole days, strawberries and nothing but strawberries. Then the supply was finished, or in bottles and under lock and key. I say, Anne, Margot calls out, the green grocer on the corner has let us have some green peas. 19 pounds. That's nice of him, I replied, and it certainly is. But oh, the work. Oh. So just think what they've done with the strawberries. And now they're getting peas. What do you think they're going to have to do with them? They're going to have to shell all the peas. So I would make a note. You made a note about the strawberries. You made a note about the bell ringing. About the postman. And then the accountant coming in. So they all had to go upstairs. You've all got to help shelling peas on Saturday morning. I'm at the bottom of 258. Mummy announced when we were at table, and sure enough, the big enamel pan duly appeared this morning, filled to the brim. Shelling peas is a boring job, but you ought to try skinning the pods. I don't think many people realize how soft and tasty the pod is when the skin on the inside has been removed. However, an even greater advantage is that the quantity which can be eaten is about triple the amount of when one only eats the peas. It's an exceptionally precise, finicky job pulling out this skin. Perhaps it's all right for pedantic dentists or precise office workers, but for an impatient teenager like me, it's frightful. We began at 9:30. I got up at 10:30. At 11:30, I sat down again. This refrain hummed in my ears. Bend the top, pull the skin, remove the string, throw out the pod, etc., etc. They danced before my eyes. Green, green, maggots, strings, rotten pods, green, green, green. Just for the sake of doing something, I chatter the whole morning. Any nonsense that comes into my head. Make everyone laugh and bore them stiff. But every string that I pull makes me feel more certain that I never, never want to be just a housewife only. She knows she doesn't want to be doing this her whole life. We finally have breakfast at 12 o'clock, but from 12:30 until 1:15, we've got to go skinning pods again. I'm just about seasick when I stop. The others a bit too. I go and sleep until 4 o'clock, but I'm still upset by those wretched peas. Yours, Anne. Saturday, the 15th of July, 1944. We are on page 259. We have had a book from the library with the challenging title of, What Do You Think of the Modern Young Girl? I want to talk about this subject today. The author of this book criticizes the youth of today from top to toe without, however, condemning the whole of the young brigade as incapable of anything good. On the contrary, she is rather of the opinion that if young people wished, they have it in their hands to make a bigger, more beautiful, and better world, but that they occupy themselves with superficial things without giving a thought to real beauty. In some passages, the writer gave me very much the feeling she was directing her criticisms at me, and that's why I want to lay myself completely bare to you for once and defend myself against this attack. I have one outstanding trait in my character, which must strike anyone who knows me for any length of time, and that is my knowledge of myself. I can watch myself and my actions just like an outsider. The Anne of every day I can face entirely without prejudice, without making excuses for her, and watch what's good and what's bad about her. This self-conscious haunts me, and every time I open my mouth, I know as soon as I've spoken whether that ought to have been different, or that was right as it was. There are so many things about myself that I condemn. I couldn't begin to name them all. I understand more and more how true Daddy's words were when he said, all children must look after their own upbringing. Parents can only give good advice or put them on the right paths, but the final forming of a person's character lies in their own hands. That is so true, guys. It doesn't matter what your parents have done to try to raise you, and heavens, don't get me wrong, It's up to parents to raise their kids to do good and to be good. But in the end, you are accountable for yourself. And so no truer words could be spoken than what she's saying right here. I would make a note about what she's saying there, and I would write down that quote, all children must look after their own upbringing, and say that her dad had told her that. And I would make a note about Anne, and it is true. She truly, some people say, about you, when you've got a bad side, that you don't see it. And sometimes we don't see the bad things about ourselves, but Anne really does see the bad things about herself. As a matter of fact, like she said, she's her own worst critic. In addition to this, I have lots of courage. I always feel so strong and as if I can bear a great deal. I feel so free and so young. I was glad when I first realized it, because I don't think I shall easily bow down before the blows that inevitably come to everyone. But I've talked about these things so often before. Now I want to come to the chapter of Daddy and Mummy don't understand me. Daddy and Mummy have always thoroughly spoiled me, were sweet to me, defended me, and have done all that parents could do. And yet I felt so terribly lonely for a long time, so left out, neglected, and misunderstood. And, she's kind of rehashing what we've heard her say about herself and her family before. Daddy tried all he could to check my rebellious spirit, but it was no use. I have cured myself by seeing for myself what was wrong in my behavior and keeping it before my eyes. When she says keeping it before my eyes, it's like she's saying, I'm always keeping it intact. I always know what is bad about me. I always know that I have a rebellious nature. How is it that Daddy was never any support to me in my struggle? Why did he completely miss the mark when he wanted to offer me a helping hand? Daddy tried the wrong methods. He always talked to me as a child who was going through difficult phases. It sounds crazy because Daddy's the one who always has taken me into his confidence, and no one but Daddy is giving me the feeling that I'm sensible. But there's one thing he's omitted, you see. He hasn't realized that for me, the fight to get on top was more important than all else. I didn't want to hear about symptoms of your age or other girls, or it wears off by itself. I didn't want to be treated as a girl like all others, but as Anne on her own merits. Pim didn't understand that. For that matter, I can't confide in anyone unless they tell me a lot about themselves. And as I know very little about Pim, I don't feel that I can tread upon more intimate ground with him. Pim always takes up the older fatherly attitude, tells me that he too has had similar passing tendencies, but still he's not able to feel with me like a friend, however hard he tries. These things have made me never mention my views on life, nor my well-considered theories to anyone but my diary, and occasionally to Margot. I concealed from Daddy everything that perturbed me. I never shared my ideals with him. I was aware of the fact that I was pushing him away from me. I couldn't do anything else. I have acted entirely according to my feelings, but I have acted in the way that was best for my peace of mind, because I should completely lose my repose and self-confidence, which I have built up so shakily, if at this stage I were to accept criticisms of my half-completed task. And I can't do that even from Pim, although it sounds very hard, for not only have I not shared my secret thoughts with Pim, but I have often pushed him even further from me by my irritability. This is a point that I think a lot about. Why is it that Pim annoys me? So much so that I can hardly bear him teaching me, that his affectionate ways strike me as being put on, and that I want to be left in peace and would really prefer it if he dropped me a bit, until I feel more certain in my attitude towards him, because I still have a gnawing feeling of guilt over that horrible letter that I dared to write him when I was so wound up. Oh, how hard it is to be really strong and brave in every way. So you see, Anne recognizes the fact that he really has tried with her. She respects him for that, but she just feels like she doesn't really know him that well. And I think she doesn't feel like he really understands her, that he tries to say that he can relate, but he really can't. Yet this was not my greatest disappointment, no. I ponder far more over Peter than Daddy. I know very well that I conquered him instead of he conquering me. I created an image of him in my mind, pictured him as a quiet, sensitive, lovable boy who needed affection and friendship. I needed a living person to whom I could pour out my heart. I wanted a friend who'd help to put me on the right road. I achieved what I wanted, and slowly but surely I drew him towards me. Finally, when I had made him feel friendly, it automatically developed into an intimacy which, on second thought, I don't think I ought to have allowed. We talked about the most private things, and yet up till now we've never touched on those things that filled and still fill my heart and soul. I still don't know quite what to make of Peter. Is he superficial, or does he still feel shy, even of me? But dropping that, I committed one error in my desire to make a real friendship. I switched over and tried to get at him by developing it into a more intimate relation, whereas I should have explored all other possibilities. He longs to be loved, and I can see that he's beginning to be more and more in love with me. He gets satisfaction out of our meetings, whereas they just have the effect of making me want to try it out with him again. And yet, I don't seem able to touch on the subjects that I'm so longing to bring out into the daylight. I drew Peter towards me far more than he realizes. Now he clings to me, and for the time being, I don't see any way of shaking him off and putting him on his own feet. When I realized that he could not be a friend for my understanding, I thought I would at least try to lift him up out of his narrow-mindedness and make him do something with his youth. So basically she's saying that she shouldn't have turned it into a romantic relationship at all. She really just wanted to see a deeper side of Peter, that which she hasn't seen yet. And so she's still dissatisfied and wishes she had not taken it as far as she did. And she feels like she has control of him, like she has caused all this, and that it's not Peter's fault. For in its innermost depths, youth is lonelier than old age. I read this saying in some book, and I've always remembered it and found it to be true. Is it true, then, that grown-ups have a more difficult time here than we do? No, I know it isn't. Older people have formed their opinions about everything and don't waver before they act. It's twice as hard for us young ones to hold our ground and maintain our opinions in a time when all ideals are being shattered and destroyed, when people are showing their worst side and do not know whether to believe in truth and right and God. Anyone who claims that the older ones have a more difficult time here certainly don't realize to what extent our problems weigh down on us. Problems for which we are probably much too young, but which thrust themselves upon us continually until after a long time. We think we found a solution, but the solution doesn't seem able to resist the facts which reduce it to nothing again. That's the difficulty in these times. Ideals, dreams, and cherished hopes rise within us, only to meet the horrible truth and be shattered. I would make a note of that quote she made, for in its innermost depths, youth is lonelier than old age. And adding to what she said, what that quote really, I think, means is at least when you are older, you usually are satisfied, maybe not always satisfied with some things you wish you had accomplished, but you have confidence in yourself. You know who you are. You know what you believe. When you are young, so many young people, and some into their 20s, still don't know who they are. They're still trying to find themselves, I guess you could say. And it's a big struggle for young people when they feel like they're stuck in a part of their life where they don't really know what they believe and they don't know who they really are. For older people, they don't struggle with that. They may regret some things, but they're confident in that they do know who they are. They have that wisdom of years. So I would mark that quote. It's really a wonder that I haven't dropped all my ideals because they seem so absurd and impossible to carry out. Yet I keep them because in spite of everything, I still believe that people are really good at heart. Remember that quote, guys? I would mark that quote because that's a very famous quote by Anne, that she wants to believe that no matter what, people are still really good at heart. And you will see that I'm getting up because it is starting to sprinkle and I don't want to get everything soaked. So that is why I'm moving out of the rain. So, moving on. It's really, and I read that part. We're at the bottom of 263, so I said mark that quote. I simply can't build up my hopes on a foundation consisting of confusion, misery, and death. I see the world gradually being turned into a wilderness. I hear the ever-approaching, turning to page 264, thunder which will destroy us too. I can feel the sufferings of millions, and yet if I look up into the heavens, I think that it will come out all right, that this cruelty too will end, and that peace and tranquility will return. In the meantime, I must uphold my ideals, for perhaps the time will come when I shall be able to carry them out. So she still has hope, guys, no matter what. that after the war's over, she may be able to carry out all her dreams of being a journalist. Friday, the 21st of July, 1944. Dear Kitty, now I am getting really hopeful. Now things are going well at last. Yes, really. They're going well. Super news. An attempt has been made on Hitler's life, and not even Jewish communists or English capitalists this time, but by a proud German general. And what's more, he's a count and still quite young. The Führer's life was saved by divine providence, and unfortunately, he managed to get off with just a few scratches and burns. A few officers and generals who were with him have been killed and wounded. The chief culprit was shot. So you definitely want to make note of that an attempt was made on Hitler's life, guys, by a German general. So you do want to make note of that. Anyway, it certainly shows that there are lots of officers and generals who are sick of the war and would like to see Hitler descend into a bottomless pit. When they've disposed of Hitler, their aim is to establish a military dictator who will make peace with the Allies. Then they intend to rearm and start another war in about 20 years' time. So, guys, I would make a note of what the plan is that she talks about, that these other officers and generals would like to see happen. I would make a note of that. Perhaps the divine power tarried on purpose in getting him out of the way, because it would be much easier and more advantageous to the Allies if the impeccable Germans kill each other off. It'll make less work for the Russians and the English, and they'll be able to begin rebuilding their own towns all the sooner. But still, we're not that far yet, and I don't want to anticipate the glorious events too soon. Still, you must have noticed this is all sober reality, and that I'm in quite a matter-of-fact mood today. For once, I'm not jabbering about high ideals. And what's more, Hitler has even been so kind as to announce to his faithful, devoted people that from now on, everyone in the armed forces must obey the Gestapo, and that any soldier who knows that one of his superiors was involved in this low, cowardly attempt upon his life may shoot the same on the spot without court-martial. So I definitely would make a note at what Hitler has announced, guys, and that is on page 265 there. So go back and look at that top paragraph and make that note. What a perfect shambles it's going to be. Little Johnny's feet began hurting him during a long march. He snapped at by his boots. The officer, Johnny, grabs his rifle and cries out, "You wanted to murder the Fuhrer, so there's your reward." One bang, and the proud chief who dared to tick off little Johnny has passed into eternal life. Or is it eternal death? In the end, whenever an officer finds himself up against a soldier or having to take the lead, he'll be wetting his pants from anxiety, because the soldiers will dare to say more than they do. Do you gather a bit what I mean, or have I been skipping too much from one subject to another? I can't help it. The prospect that I may be sitting on school benches next October makes me feel far too cheerful to be logical. Oh, dearie me, hadn't I just told you that I didn't want to be too hopeful? Forgive me, they haven't given me the name. Little bundle of contradictions, all for nothing. So in the beginning of that paragraph, basically, you don't have to make it the note of that. She was just kind of making up a little bit of story about what would be happening between these officers and generals if they started feeling like there was a threat and they could just kill the other one. That's basically the point she's trying to make in that little story. We're at the bottom of 265, Tuesday, the 1st of August, 1944. Dear Kitty, little bundle of contradictions. That's how I ended my last letter, and that's how I'm going to begin this one. Let me turn the page. We're flipping to 266. A little bundle of contradictions. Can you tell me exactly what it is? What does contradiction mean? Like so many words, it can mean two things. Contradiction from without and contradiction from within. The first is the ordinary, not giving in easily, always knowing best, getting in the last word. Enfin, all the unpleasant qualities for which I am renowned. She means that that's the things that she's known for, those very qualities. The second nobody knows about, that's my own secret. I've already told you before that I have, as it were, a dual personality. One half embodies my exuberant cheerfulness, making fun of everything, my high-spiritedness, and above all, the way I take everything lightly. This includes not taking offense in flirtation, a kiss, an embrace, a dirty joke. This side is usually lying in wait and pushes away the other, which is much better, deeper, and pure. You must realize that no one knows Anne's better side, and that's why most people find me so insufferable. Certainly I'm a giddy clown for one afternoon, but then everyone's had enough of me for another month. Really, it's just the same, as I love film is for deep-thinking people, simply a diversion, amusing just for once, something which is too soon forgotten. Not bad, but certainly not good. I loathe having to tell you this, but why shouldn't I, if I know it's true anyway? My lighter, superficial side will always be too quick for the deeper side of me, and that's why it will always win. You can't imagine how often I've already tried to push this Anne away, to cripple her, to hide her, because after all, she's only half of what's called Anne. But it doesn't work, and I know, too, why it doesn't work. I'm awfully scared that everyone who knows me as I always am will discover that I have another side, a finer and better side. I'm afraid they'll laugh at me, think I'm ridiculous and sentimental, not take me seriously. I'm used to not being taken seriously, but it's only the light-hearted Anne that's used to it and can bear it. The deeper Anne is too frail for it. Sometimes if I really compel the good Anne to take the stage for a quarter of an hour, she simply shrivels up as soon as she has to speak and lets Anne number one